Hey 2C! Today we're going to start a read aloud of Flat Stanley. So sit back, relax, curl up, listen, and I'm going to start with Chapter 1, and that is called The Big Bulletin Board. Breakfast was ready. "I will go wake the boys," Mrs. Lambchop said to her husband, George Lambchop. Just then, their younger son, Arthur, called from the bedroom he shared with his brother, Stanley. "Hey, come and look, hey!" Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop were both very much in favor of politeness and careful speech. "Hay is for horses, Arthur, not people," Mr. Lambchop said as they entered the bedroom. "Try to remember that." "Excuse me," said Arthur, "but look!" He pointed to Stanley's bed. Across it lay the enormous bulletin board that Mr. Lambchop had given the boys a Christmas ago so that they could pin up pictures and messages and maps. It had fallen during the night on top of Stanley. But Stanley was not hurt. In fact, he would have still been sleeping if he had not been woken by his brother's shout. "What's going on here?" he called out cheerfully from beneath the enormous board. Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop hurried to lift it from the bed. "Heavens!" said Mrs. Lambchop. "Gosh!" said Arthur. "Stanley's flat as a pancake," said Mr. Lambchop. "It's the darndest thing I've ever seen." "Let's all have breakfast," Mrs. Lambchop said. "Then Stanley and I will go see Dr. Dan and hear what he has to say." In his office, Dr. Dan examined Stanley all over. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Does it hurt very much?" "I sort of felt tickly a while after I got up," Stanley Lambchop said. "But I feel fine now." "Well, that's mostly how it is with these cases," said Dr. Dan. "We'll just have to keep an eye on this young fellow," he said when he had finished the examination. "Sometimes we doctors, despite all our years of training and experience, can only marvel at how little we really know." Mrs. Lambchop said she thought Stanley's clothes would have to be altered by the tailor now, so Dr. Dan told his nurse to take Stanley's measurements. Mrs. Lambchop wrote them down. Stanley was 4 feet tall, about a foot wide, and half an inch thick. And that is the end of Chapter 1.